It's the Brad and John Show.
The Brad and John Show for Thursday, January 16th, 2025. This is B-Block. John, we talked yesterday about the Perimeter Solutions Company, which is a spinoff from your old company, Monsanto, correct?
Yeah, we did.
Did you by any chance hear Mark Reardon interview the guy, the head dude, or not the head dude, but the guy who was in charge of all the firefighting chemicals and things like that yesterday afternoon?
I did not, no.
Fascinating interview and a couple of different things. Mark's a really good interviewer. Matter of fact, probably one of the best in St. Louis radio. But I was a little bit disappointed because he started off the show, and if you don't know what we're talking about, the Perimeter Solutions, the company name has come to prominence because when you're watching the fires being fought in California, when they are dumping the fire retardant, and it's usually red or like sort of pinkish red, they're dumping it from like the big tanker aircraft. That is made by a company that's headquartered here in Perimeter, St. Louis, Perimeter Solutions, which once upon a time was under the Monsanto umbrella. And we talked about that yesterday, and the question came up, where did they make it? Did they make it here in St. Louis? Well, he had him on the air, and that came up that it's not made in St. Louis, but Mark never asked him where it was made. That's issue number one. Issue number two came out when he was really good, too, very thorough. He said that this company is 61 years old. How old's Monsanto? Is Monsanto 61 years old?
Monsanto doesn't exist anymore.
I mean, but was it? Would it have been if it doesn't?
It was over 100 years old. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this came into 61 years old. Would have put it sometime. It came into existence back in the what? I guess with the early 60s or mid 60s.
Yeah, you're right.
Mid to late 60s. Okay, and what they do is, and it was fascinating because he talked about the fact that their sales are primarily to governmental agencies, to firefighting crews and things like that. But he also talked about they sell it to like homeowners associations and things like that. And the way it works, it doesn't necessarily always have to be dropped from a plane. It has to be, it can be applied, on the ground. Now, he didn't say how. I'm thinking to myself, do they spray it? Does it come out of like some kind of a, bazooka machine or something like that? Or, does it come out of like a, like snowblower kind of machine or something like that? But the interesting thing was, it doesn't put out the fire. And this is, I guess, where the name, the Perimeter Solutions company name came about. They don't put it on the fire. They put it in an area to block the fire. And what it does is it coats all the vegetation and stuff like that and essentially makes it, and he gave the chemical reaction. It was sort of complicated. But essentially it has a chemical reaction that when it gets hot, it essentially extinguishes the fire. It doesn't put it out, dumping it on the fire, but if it starts to burn, it essentially snuffs itself out. And it was pretty interesting. And he said that they sell it a lot to homeowners associations in areas of the country that are very, prone to having these wildfire problems, where they have crews that come and they do a perimeter around the area they want to protect, and that's what keeps the fire out of these particular areas that they're trying to protect with this chemical. It was a great interview. The guy was really sharp. And
have you thought about getting a contract with them, Brett?
A contract with what? About me with having my little electrical fire yesterday?
Wait, you had an electrical fire, Brad? I thought we weren't supposed to mention that on the air.
We're not supposed to mention that on the air, John. We had an electrical fire yesterday, but that's a whole other story. Okay, but anyway, it was pretty interesting interview, and he talked about, like you said, the headquarters are in Clayton and all the back end stuff. He talked about all the finance and all the order taking and the contract negotiation. Obviously, if they're dealing with governments, that's never easy to do, right? You know that, John, right? You probably
that's true.
Dealt with that with your days with Monsanto, because you had lots of government people buying, especially Roundup and things like that, right? The parks departments and all the...
Yeah, and you know what I thought of? One of the topics that, that I think you'd be interested in, Brad, one of the first subjects that I worked on is, allow me to diverge here for like 60 seconds, but it has to do with something in our listing area, which is, areas like Busch Wildlife, right out there by Francis Howell High School. A lot of these nature areas that are looking to attract wildlife, duck, whatever, they have deer, whatever, if they have some hunting areas out there. So they'll go in, and a lot of these parks will use corn. They'll use corn or soybeans, but especially corn to attract wildlife. They might even use sorghum. And so they'll buy seed from somewhere, whether the old Monsanto or another seed company, whatever. And so one of the tactics of anti-GMO activists would be to push for something that said, we should have a rule. There ought to be a law, Barack Obama, where you can't have GMOs on public land. We shouldn't be polluting public lands with these biotechnology products. So we had to coordinate. I shouldn't say that. I'm trained to not use the word work with or coordinate. We were trained to interact with Fish and Wildlife Services and other people because they would get pushback. Because, Brad, if you're planting a big giant field with a bunch of corn and you want corn that can actually survive the elements, maybe you'll plant some biotech corn. It's easy, it's cheap, and you'll attract some wildlife. But activists were trying to get the Obama administration to ban any GMOs on public land. But I think it's curious. So when you go out to Busch Wildlife and you see corn, I've seen sorghum out there, whatever you see, you never think about the fact that somebody goes out there and plants a whole bunch of corn. And in fact, if you're traveling some of the back roads of Busch Wildlife, you'll see giant John Deere tractors out there that are used for planting.
Were they successful? The anti-GMO people, were they successful or were they not?
Well, as I pull up my internal issue alert here from 2009, which I totally don't own anything for my days based on a non-disclosure at all. But yeah, as I understand it, Brad, they had no success because the Obama administration and people who work in agriculture and who work in fish and wildlife understand that things like GMOs don't pose any threat to environment or animals or wildlife or anything. It was a publicity stunt and a ploy. It was just, it's another tool of these activist groups to put pressure on the public and on elected officials.
But they were thwarted in their efforts, and the government did plant the GMO corn.
Yeah. So, and I would imagine too, if you go out to Busch Wildlife today and you see corn or you see sorghum, it's probably Roundup ready. So they can probably control weeds out there by just spraying a little Roundup over the top. But I don't know. I'm not sure. And by the way, Monsanto weren't the only people selling GMOs. You could have bought it from Pioneer, or hundreds of other companies could sell GMOs.
So what you're telling me is all the car crashes I've had on 94 in Busch Wildlife where I hit deer was because of that Monsanto corn? Is that what you're telling me?
100%, yeah. And if you would cut up the deer's belly, which you ended up doing because you're chintzy and you make jerky, you would have seen a lot of GMO corn in there, Brad. And GMO corn is radiant. It looks just like you're driving past the lagoon at Francis Howell, which is the beauty of the whole thing. It's symmetry.
So there's a stretch. And when I say that when I used to drive back and forth in 94, back and forth to the radio station in Washmo, there's a stretch from just south of the WizRap Dome there, if people know where I'm talking about, where you go back to the Army base. That down to pretty much through the waterworks, and most people know where I'm talking about if they drive 94, that section of 94, where that is probably where I've hit, of the 19 deer I've hit in my life, I probably hit 15 of them there. And if I was coming back late at night, anytime after about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, I could have won a bet almost every night if I would have said to somebody, hey, I bet you I'll be able to send you a picture of a deer, at least one deer, as I drive home from the radio station at night. And almost every night I could have won that bet 5, 10, sometimes even 15 or 20 times over, as our herd of deer would be crossing 94 down there. And now I know why, because of John Combest and his GMO
That's right, single-handedly. And Brad, do you ever get a little nostalgic when you think about the times of your life when you used to hit deer instead of backing into your own cars?
John, I knew you were going to say
Remember
that.
when you had your faculties and you would drive and you would hit deer, which you don't have control over?
John, to give you an idea of how screwed up my life is, I found a rear glass. I've told this story about a week ago. It's this past Saturday. I went to one of the Schnucks, and as I got into my car, I didn't realize this, but my rear window of my SUV exploded onto the parking lot of Schnucks. And I've been driving around with no rear window in my car, and damn is it cold. But so yesterday, or actually Tuesday, I located a rear glass at a junkyard, okay? And the guy says, we got to take it out of the car. It'll take about a day, okay? So yesterday morning, he calls me and says, your glass is ready to pick up. So yesterday afternoon, I'm getting in my car to go drive to buy my used piece of glass. I already paid for it, but to go pick it up and put it on the back of my SUV. So I have a rear window when my alarm company calls me and says, hey, we have a smoke alarm and a power outage at your studio. And I'm going, I just left there like 20 minutes ago. So I turned back around to the fact that, yes, I have a major problem. That started my afternoon yesterday, where having to call Ameren, having to yank the meter and have repairs made to the breaker panel, and not getting things back on the air till about 9 or 10 o'clock last night. So it was a fun day. Okay.
Well, you got it working though, Brad, because you are resilient, and you talked that poor Ameren guy's ear off, didn't you?
Well, I had two nice guys. The guy who came out to pull the meter couldn't have been a nicer guy. A matter of fact, I was down the street because I thought to myself, I'm just going to run down the street and put gas in my car. And of course, you're waiting for somebody. You leave, and they show up, 30 seconds after you leave. And he called me. He says, hey, I can't pull the meter until there's somebody here. I'll be right back. So I came back up the street. And then the guy last night, the amazing thing was, I'm cold. I'm sitting out in my car running the engine to stay warm. And the guy calls me and he says, I got your meter back in. I go, are you here? He says, yeah, I just showed up and put the meter in. He says, are you ready to turn the power back on? I go, yeah. So I turned the power back on, and nothing caught fire, nothing blew up. So I'm a happy guy. Okay.
Wow, way to go, Brad.
Okay. Story I saw yesterday. Have you seen the Stacey Abrams story?
No, what happened?
Stacey Abrams is the lady who twice ran for governor in Atlanta, and it's sort of interesting because only the Republicans, and only Trump has questioned the authenticity of elections, in 2020. But of course, let's go back to 2016 when I think it was Hillary Clinton. A lot of Democrats said that there's no way Trump actually won legally.
That's right, and they protested. Yeah,
right, they protested, and they did in the Senate when they did what they do on January 6th, back in January 6th of 2017, for you history buffs, there were Democrats that were not wanting to certify the vote. You remember that, John? Because
I do remember
that. They said
yes.
that Trump did not win. But of course, nobody remembers that anymore. Okay, Stacey Abrams ran for governor, and she's a black woman in Atlanta, and that's part of the issue because of the fact that she says that people discriminated because she's black and she's a woman and yada, yada, yada. She ran for governor 4 years ago, and she ran for governor in this past election as well, too. And she lost twice. It came out yesterday that two of the groups funded by things she started, and they're called the Democrat Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams. One of them was she's been hit with Georgia ethics commissions for violating campaign finance laws to bolster Abrams' 2018 election. And she got the largest fine ever levied in history in Georgia. She was fined $300,000, and this is with the New Georgia Project and the New Georgia Project Action Fund. And essentially, what they're saying is, and the numbers are somewhat staggering. You think that good old Hunter Biden, has got some numbers. The numbers were she was essentially guilty of hiding 2.3. Let me see the exact numbers here. I can't find them right now. But it was in the millions of dollars of revenue that they brought in. And also there was not only, and this with the Missouri Ethics Commission, you have to do both sides of the equation, both sides of the balance sheet. You have to say where the money's coming from, and you have to say where the money was going. Correct, John?
You're exactly right. Yeah, you have to account for it down to the penny,
right.
Essentially.
Essentially, you have to say, we got this amount in, and we bought this and this and this with it, and paid this guy and paid this guy. They did none of that. They got millions of dollars in, and they spent millions of dollars, and they didn't account for it. And I'm going no, hold on a minute now. She's the one that was saying the elections were rigged. Remember, she's the one that said that. You don't remember this whole crazy thing with her? And to this
of course
day,
I do, Brad. Yeah.
The first time around, she has never conceded defeat from the first election. Did you know that?
Yeah. And so that's what made it ironic when everybody was criticizing Trump for January 6th and the insurrection, is that Stacey Abrams pretend that she never lost.
Right. And the crazy thing about it is, you talk to Mike Sommer, and he's the election campaign finance guru. I call him the guru. Would you agree with me and John? He knows the laws inside and out, because this is what he does. He's a CPA, but he does a ton of candidates where he's their treasurer. And I've been in two different seminars with him where he gives this. I'm telling you, this guy knows the MEC laws better than anybody I've ever heard. And they would pepper with him questions. What if I did this? And he'll say, well, you can't do that because of this and this and this and this and this and this. I'm like, whoa, this is complicated stuff. And it's to the point where you need somebody like that. Well, apparently, Stacey didn't have somebody like that. And they went essentially off the tracks with their campaign and $300,000. Now, you know that with the state of Missouri, they do that. Well, they got fined $30,000, but if you pay in 30 days, it's $300. Do you think they're going to do the same thing with her?
Yeah, I would imagine so. But did they say what she spent? Like, have they been able to account for where this money went? I'm guessing she went to nail salons and bought clothes and gave her friends contracts.
Yeah, she was at Top Golf and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and Lane Bryant. Right. Judging by her size.
Okay, this is the tweet yesterday. Today we instituted, this is from the Georgia Ethics Commission, just like with the Missouri Ethics Commission. Today we instituted the largest fine in commission history. We're proud of the commitment our staff attorneys made in conjunction with the Attorney General's office to see this case through after 5 years of litigation. 5 years this has been by. Okay, here it is right now. The group's admitted to failing to disclose $4.2 million in contributions and $3.2 million in expenditures. Just a little bit of money in and out, right? You know, John, just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the other thing is, why are you surprised? Why? I don't mean you. Why is anyone surprised by this? This would be like telling me that St. Louis Development Corp is giving money to non-existent businesses. It's telling me that city inspectors are shaking down the people they're investigating in order to give their family members contracts. It'd be like saying Spire has their own snowplows that just meticulously plow the streets of VIPs.
Are you saying that a city inspector would show up at a job site and say, you got a problem here and this thing needs to get fixed, and here's the construction company you need to call to fix the problem? Are you saying that, John?
No, Brad, that's straight out of a Sopranos episode. That wouldn't happen in St. Louis City. The Leisure Boys have been dead for decades. That bomb went off on the highway before I was even born.
Yes, one of the things of the NOCO, one of the NOCO things that you and I have never talked about is all the car bombs that went off in North County. Matter of fact, when I was a youngster, this is long before you were born, I think it was one of the Leisures was blown up right there on Redmond, right in front of Our Lady Loretta School. You know what I'm talking? You ever, that story?
I didn't know that happened in front of Our Lady of Loretto.
Yes, and then the same. I think he survived that, and then they blew him up in the parking lot of that place that used to be the pizza place there next to the Kmart between Old and New Halls Ferry. You know what I'm talking about? There was another explosion.
I can't picture that right now.
Man, I tell you what,
hey, but you know what? All the secrets are that. I don't know. And all the details about Walter Scott, you can find them there at the bottom of a cistern, Brad. But you can find all the secrets are out there.
Do you want me to tell my Walter Scott story?
I would love to hear it. Yeah, in C Block.
Okay, we'll tell the story in C Block. Okay, and so if you go, who's Walter Scott? Bob Cuban and the N-Men, if you have to be a certain age. And as John would say, you have to be a boomer to know about that, right?
I know Bob Cuban. He performs at Republican fundraisers, by the way. That's another story. Go ahead, Brad.
Still? He's
Oh yeah, I've seen Bob Cuban, man. He's a staple. If you've been let's tell it in C Block.
He must be in his 90s now, don't you think?
Yeah, he looks as old as you, so I was guessing hundreds.
Okay.